Hello, everyone. I want to begin with something that may surprise you. Most people who lose money to scams are not careless. They are not foolish. They are not uninformed. And they are not necessarily bad with technology. In fact, many of them are exactly the kind of people you would never expect. Responsible people. Careful people. People who balanced a checkbook for decades. People who paid their bills on time. People who spent their entire lives making smart financial decisions. So why do they lose money? From everything I've observed, the answer is surprisingly simple. Trust. Not technology. Not passwords. Not smartphones. Trust. Because the frauds causing the most damage today do not begin with hacking. They begin with credibility. A voice that sounds professional. A message that appears official. A website that looks familiar. A caller who already knows your name. A person who seems helpful. And that is what makes modern scams different from the scams many people remember from years ago. The old scams were easier to spot. The grammar was terrible. The stories made no sense. The callers sounded suspicious. Most people recognized the danger immediately. Today's scams are different. Today's scammers invest time. They study how government agencies communicate. They study how banks communicate. They study how Medicare communicates. They copy logos. They copy websites. They copy language. Sometimes they even know details about the person they are targeting before the conversation begins. That changes everything, because people are no longer deciding whether the caller sounds like a criminal. They are deciding whether the caller sounds legitimate. And that is a much harder question. One thing I find fascinating is that many scams today start with something real. A real government program. A real benefit. A real policy change. A real concern. Then the scammer builds a fake story around that real thing. And that makes the entire situation feel believable. Think about Social Security. Millions of Americans receive Social Security benefits every month. Changes happen. Cost of living adjustments happen. Letters arrive. Rules change. People expect communication. So when a message appears claiming there is an update to your benefits, it feels plausible. Not because the message is true, but because it is connected to something that actually exists. The same thing happens with Medicare. People know Medicare is important. People know there are enrollment periods, new plans, coverage updates, drug costs, medical claims. So when somebody claims to be calling about Medicare, many people naturally listen. And that is exactly what scammers are counting on. What concerns me most is not that these criminals understand technology. It is that they understand psychology. They know that fear works. They know that urgency works. They know that authority works. And they know that confusion works. If they can make someone worried enough, rushed enough, or confused enough, they often do not need sophisticated technology at all. The victim begins helping them. That is the part many people overlook. The scammer's goal is not always to steal information. Sometimes the goal is to convince the victim to willingly hand it over. That is a very different situation. Because traditional security advice focuses on protecting information, modern fraud often focuses on manipulating emotions. And emotions are harder to defend than passwords. One pattern appears again and again. The victim is told something is wrong. A benefit is at risk. An account has been compromised. A payment cannot be processed. A security issue has been detected. An investigation is underway. The exact story changes. The emotional formula stays the same. Create fear. Create urgency. Remove time for careful thinking. What I tell people is this. Any legitimate organization wants you to understand what is happening. A scammer wants you to react before you understand what is happening. That distinction has become one of the most useful fraud filters I know. Another thing I have noticed is how central smartphones have become. A phone used to be a communication device. Today it is much more than that. For many people, their entire financial life exists inside a single device. Banking, investments, email, passwords, insurance, medical information, government accounts, social security, everything. That means the phone itself has become one of the most valuable assets a person owns. And because of that, scammers increasingly focus on gaining access to the phone rather than attacking accounts directly. What surprises many people is how little access a criminal sometimes needs. A few minutes, a few taps, one moment of trust. That can be enough. The reason is simple. Once someone gains access to the place where all of your accounts connect, they no longer need to attack every account individually. They can move through your digital life from the inside. That is why I believe one of the most important habits today is maintaining control of your device. Not because everyone asking for help is dishonest, but because access creates opportunity. And opportunity is what scammers are looking for. There is another trend that deserves attention. Fake urgency. Whenever somebody claims that something must be done immediately, I become cautious. Not because emergencies never happen, but because scammers depend on speed. The less time you have to think, The less time you have to verify. The less time you have to verify, the more likely you are to make a mistake. This is why I think one of the most powerful anti-fraud tools is surprisingly simple. Pause. Take a breath. End the conversation. Call back using a verified number. Open the official website yourself. Talk to a family member. Wait an hour. Wait a day. The overwhelming majority of legitimate situations can survive a delay. Most scams cannot. That single habit has prevented countless losses. Now let's talk about something that I believe receives too little attention. Embarrassment. Many scam victims do not report what happened. Not because they do not care, because they feel ashamed. They think they should have known better. They think people will judge them. They think admitting what happened means admitting weakness. I disagree. The people behind these schemes are professionals. They practice every day. They refine their techniques constantly. They study human behavior. And they are specifically targeting people they believe are trustworthy. Being targeted does not mean you are naive. It means somebody saw an opportunity. The real mistake is staying silent afterward. Because every reported scam helps someone else avoid becoming the next victim. At the end of the day, I think the biggest misconception about fraud is that it is a technology problem. Most of the time, it is not. It is a trust problem. The technology changes every year. The psychology barely changes at all. Someone claims authority. Someone creates urgency. Someone asks for information. Someone asks for access. Someone asks you to act before thinking. That pattern repeats again and again. And the people who protect themselves most effectively are not necessarily the people who know the most about technology. They are the people who recognize that pattern. They slow down. They verify. They ask questions. They refuse to be rushed. And they remember one important truth. No legitimate government agency, bank, Medicare representative, or Social Security employee should ever need you to panic. If somebody is trying to make you panic, that alone is a reason to stop and verify what is happening. Because in 2026, the most dangerous scams are not the ones that look fake. They are the ones that look completely real. And that is exactly why awareness matters more than ever.